call to order the April 9th, 2019 Equalization Board. And we don't have to do the moment of silent reflection or pledge allegiance. We already did that. So do we just review and approve the agenda?
You don't even.
You don't
have
even have
that.
an agenda. Nope.
Okay.
So-
This ain't an agenda?
What you've got is, today is the first day that the Board of Equalization can meet and has to meet.
Okay.
On the first day, what we always do is bring before you the exempt properties that have applied for an exemption from property taxes.
Okay.
The commission approves or denies all exemptions from property taxes. We do that on the first day because the law says that if you deny an exemption, the property owner has the right after so many days to come back before you again. That allows that time to do that if we deal with the exempt stuff on the first day.
Okay, I got that part, Shannon. Just making sure we open it right and we do. Okay, so you go ahead and move ahead on your first.
Okay, so
Omit exemption 100% impartial. Is that where you're going first?
yes, and what we're going to do is we've got several lists of properties that have applied for exemption. We will present to you, but there's a couple of them that, well, let me back up. Everybody that wants an exemption from property taxes has to apply to my office. And then my office looks at the property, makes a recommendation to the board, which approves or denies it at this meeting. There are a few properties that I've recommended denial, and I'll explain why. And I got a couple of those property owners here, so I would suggest we deal with those since they're here and we don't make them wait. The board approves or denies all exemptions from property taxes. I make a recommendation to you on that. And let's start with, let's just do the first one on the list, which is third line down on what you've got, Rapid City Regional Hospital.
Okay, where are you at, Shannon?
Nope.
Let us find the paper.
Top of the list.
Oh, this one. Okay, yep.
Okay. So Rapid City Regional Hospital made an application for exemption from property taxes on that parcel number 67075. It is a bare piece of land next to the new hospital, it's on the screen, that they built out on Highway 16. It is not used as a parking lot. It's not used for anything. It is excess land. All of the statutes that grant an exemption from property taxes, and there's one for hospitals, they're all consistent in that it has to be owned by the exempt entity and used for an exempt purpose. And this is not being used. It's excess land. And so I recommended deny the exemption on this. I talked to the hospital, and no argument from them. That's why they're not here today. So I think you should act on this one. And then we'll go to the next two, and the next two, those people are actually here.
So Shannon, on this piece of property, is this a different lot or lots from what they're, why can't it be a part of the overall campus?
Because they're not using this piece of property.
Okay.
It's excess land.
Okay. But you could have fringe property basically any place that's not used.
Yeah. You got to be careful with what you call fringe property. A hospital or a church or a charity or anybody can own whatever property they want. The hospital could own a mini mart, and it could be used for a mini mart.
Sure. Okay.
Doesn't make it exempt. The hospital could own 40 acres in the hills. And some churches and charities do own land like that. They get land donated. In this case, what the hospital did is they bought some land out there and they built a new hospital out there. This happens to be a piece that's not being used right now.
Shannon, is that property got a separate county ID number for taxation purposes?
Yes, 67075.
So it could be sold separately, right?
Oh, absolutely.
It's not part of the legal description of the hospital itself. It's contiguous to the hospital property, but it's a separate property with a separate ID number.
Yes.
Currently sitting vacant.
The hospital owns many, many tax parcels. This is just one of them.
And what have you historically done in situations like this?
I recommend deny because it's not being used.
Is that normally the
Yep.
decision of the commissioners? Then I would recommend denial.
Second.
Been a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, motion carries. Number 2.
The next one we've got is Black Hills Crisis Pregnancy Center. The property owner is here for that one, and he wishes to speak. I will pass out a copy of the law that's relevant for this. There are actually 2 parcels here. The Black Hills Crisis Pregnancy Center was donated 2 lots. They used to have 2 houses on them. There's a garage left. Can we just go to Rapid Map, Deb, and we see where they're at?
Shannon, is that 10-4-9.1? Is that the law that
Yes.
we have a copy of it?
You have a copy? Okay, all right. So, Black Hills Crisis Pregnancy Center has applied for an exemption as a charity. And the statute, again, the first sentence in the statute says, property owned by a public charity and used for charitable purposes is exempt from taxation. Has to be owned by the charity, and there's no argument here that Black Hills Crisis Pregnancy Center meets the definition of a charity. Or at least I don't argue that. But because the property is not being used for their exempt purpose, their office is somewhere else, I'm recommending denial of the application here again. And I'm sure the property owner would like to speak. I should say these 2 lots, there's 2 lots. We've got one in blue, the other one's on the corner. You can see a house on it. The pregnancy center has removed the houses off of both of these properties. And it is Haynes and Anamosa, on the corner of Haynes and Anamosa. The Black Hills Pregnancy Centers owned them for about 4 years.
So Shannon, let me ask you a question. So you said the other one, and I can understand it was bare lot, separated, and they were going to, they could sell that lot. In this case, if they show plans and stuff that they are going to build on this lot, and it's gonna be this summer or 2 months, I understand then it's not gonna be sold separately. It's gonna be a whole different building. Now, don't get me wrong, the hospital could do that later, but these guys, if they have their plans set to what they're building on this property, I think then for me, it makes a little bit more of a difference that they're not gonna go sell these in, 2 weeks and say, we got this exempt, we saved taxes on it, and now we're selling it, and, you see where I'm going.
I do, except the law says owned by a charity and used, not used someday, used on the assessment date of November 1st.
Okay.
I don't doubt that there is some plan to use this in the future. And in fact, we get that from churches, more frequently from churches who will buy land and eventually build a church on it. And they pay taxes until there is a church building. In my opinion, if there's a building under construction, it's being used. But most of the time, construction is complete by the assessment date, and then it's being used. But up until that time, it's just prospective. It's not currently being used.
And I remember on our church on the bypass, that's exactly what happened. There was bare land, and we didn't get the exemption. And then when we showed that we were building the church, so you are right. I just thought, in a sense, if someone was showing you that there's plans and but they have to do it, those plans have to be done by November 1st to March 1st to show you that, the building's gonna be started and good to go by the time we do the taxes come out, right?
Yeah, the law says the property is used for a charitable purpose, okay? In the example of a church, because that happens more common. The assessment date is November 1st. If there is a church under construction, and I've had several of them, where the church is almost complete. They want to get it done by winter. And as long as there is a church building mostly complete there, I say that's being used for the purpose. But when there's no construction, then you can't say there's any use. When it's bare land with plans to build someday, it's not now being used.
Okay,
So,
thank you. Go ahead.
Rita, I guess we have somebody else who wanted to speak on this?
The property owner is here, yes.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from the property owner.
Good morning, Commissioners. Travis Laster, with the Executive Director of Black Hills Pregnancy Center. Just to kind of give just a little bit of overview and background on this property. Yes, it was donated to us approximately 4 years ago. We had a previous administration that was in charge of doing this project. Since then, that executive director is no longer employed with the organization. I actually took over the executive director's position in March of last year, so March of 2018. I took over at a time when our organization had to almost shut the doors. We restructured, rebranded, and I came on board to clean up some of the messes. This is one of them that we're in the process of trying to clean up. It had sat there for almost 4 years as an eyesore, if any of y'all have driven by it. Now the two homes are off. One of the homes that last home was actually supposed to be off in March. We actually were very close to having to do some legal action against the individual that purchased that home to get them to have it removed, because they didn't remove it until November of last year. So we lost a whole year last year because the individual who purchased that home so that we could move forward with some of our plans didn't get it off the property until significantly later than it was expected. So last year, March, he had purchased it and then didn't get it off until November after we discuss legal action for them to move. So since then, obviously through the winter, we didn't have anything planned to do work with the property, but we did start doing some plans to verify the size of the building could fit and all that kind of good stuff. We actually, after I leave this meeting, I'll be talking to the site prep engineer to come out there and get it build ready so that we can move forward to the next stage. So I'm just asking, I understand, I've heard some of the conversations, Shannon and I have talked on the phone about the use. I would say, in essence, we are using it, I get we're not using it directly and physically, but we're using it to raise funds to put a building and a structure there. Our impact on the community right now, we have low funds because we worked really hard to rid ourselves of $27,000 worth of debt in the last year. We've liquidated some assets for that. So we're kind of on a really tight budget. I'm just asking for a little grace for a year, at least for consideration, to allow us to do what we need to do to raise the funds to start working and putting a new structure on there to impact our community. Right now, just in the last 3 months, we've served over 177 individuals in the community that are low income with our services, and that's what we're here for. We actually don't have any governmental tax grants or monies that come to us. We're all donor-based, and so that's why we're asking for at least a little bit of consideration in this aspect.
Thanks,
Do you
Travis.
have any questions for me?
No, thanks for the update, because I drive by it every day.
Oh,
That's
trust me,
why-
it's been a sore.
That was one of the reasons why I asked, but I mean, unfortunately, the previous one just before you, to me, this is kind of the same thing. Your intentions are to do it, but I've also, like I said, and you even said 4 years. What happens if something doesn't fall through and they have to sell it? I'd love to give you a break and do what you need to do and get things organized, but it'd be unfair to do it for one and not the other.
Travis, I understand you to say that site preparation is going to begin on it, though, soon?
Yes, sir. Actually, we had some bids that were placed, and the board met last night. Our board of directors met last night, and I'm going to go speak to the construction office, David Gustafson, today to finalize that contract so that we can get that moving here in the very near future.
Second question, do you think that there will be construction for a building during 2019?
That's a good question. The board, when we had some further discussion last night, one of the Habitat for Humanity, his wife is actually on our board now, and they're looking at grants to get us moving forward with that. That is we're pushing forward to move, to grow. We actually have to expand. Our current location where we're at, we're maxed to capacity to take care of our clients. As we finish up the training with some of our advocates, we are going to literally have to play musical chairs to see our clients that come through our doors, because we'll probably see an average of 50 to 60 clients in a month. So we're having to really look at this and move forward as fast as we possibly can so that we can actually expand. We're in about 1,500 square feet right now, and if you see the preliminary site plans are about 3,600 square feet just for the first floor. So we have to expand to just even meet our clientele. The other thing is it's really close to a bus stop compared to where we're at right now, so we actually lose some clients because there's no bus stop near us. It's about a half a mile, quarter of a mile from where we're at currently. And then there's one just right up on the corner there, so it makes it a lot easier for our clients who don't have transportation to make it to us. So we're gonna push forward as fast as we can get the funds and get the grants and get moving and find somebody who will start building it. So if I had my way, we'd start building, tomorrow, but, there is a little bit of a process in that.
So Travis,
Yes, ma'am.
if you were starting to build in 2019 and you could show your building in 2019, I think I would think differently, but you're not really giving us an exact, or me, an exact answer on if that's going to move forward. And I'm with Lloyd, maybe that, you could end up selling the property by that time. Not that you will, but you never know in case you're tight on cash flow. So it's kind of hard for me to go and, as much as you want to, in a sense, to help you out. Because we did it not to one person doesn't make me do it to somebody else. It's all circumstantial, but in this case, Gary did ask a good question. Are you going to get started in 2019? So I say for next year, you probably have a chance, but this year, for me, that'd be kind of hard to push that through.
Shannon, I understand there's no physical construction there, but it does appear that there is work in progress. Just the fact that they started tearing the existing residences down would lead me to believe that they've already expended some funds to start that work that has to be done before they can actually start a structure. So with that being said, I'm not, it's not black and white. It's kind of a gray area for me, but could we do 50% like some of these others? Would that be something that we could consider?
I wouldn't recommend that because the law says it's used for the charitable purpose. I think I am stretching that to say if there's a building under construction, like the church, a church building under construction that's used for that purpose. That's stretching it there. The law actually says used for the charitable purpose.
You could make a motion to that effect if you'd like, sir.
I will make the motion for the upcoming year that we assess that
You have two parcels.
Okay,
two
Keep that in
parcels,
mind when you
both
make your
parcels
motion.
at 50%, similar to some of the other ones that we're going to be looking at later today.
okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Been a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Welcome.
Okay,
Shannon?
you've got one more property owner that is here. That is Wellspring Incorporated. I don't know if they'll want to say something or not. But this is the situation. Wellspring built a treatment facility for youth near the Roosevelt Swim Center. The building is complete. They're in it. They have applied for an exemption. The law requires that they make an application by the deadline of November 1st. I will not argue that the property is not owned by an exempt entity. I've met with them, looked at the facility. I think the ownership is an exempt entity, and I think the building is used for an exempt purpose. I'm convinced of that. I had to recommend denial because their application came in, I think, January, after the deadline of November 1st. The building was almost done on November 1st. They moved in November, so they weren't thinking about making that application in time. Just because the application was late, I recommend denial on it. I do think that they have grounds in the law to apply for an exemption next year, get it, and then request an abatement for this year because it was being used for 11 out of 12 months or something like that. But only because they were late on the application, I recommended denial on it.
So what would you do if we said it was okay this year? Would that be against the law or anything? Because you're gonna abate them next year anyway.
Well, I think if we wouldn't have to, we'd have to seriously consider it.
Okay.
So the law does say an application by November 1st. So maybe I should say this. When somebody is late on an application, and it happens every year, there's one or two that's late on an application, they have to show up here for a meeting, sit back and watch you make a decision on this. And if we didn't do that, nobody'd ever meet that deadline. At least this adds some seriousness to the deadline.
Okay.
So Shannon, is an abatement a year down the road, is that do you look at that as a more positive procedure rather than awarding it today?
You put me in a difficult position here because most of the time I stand here and jump up and down and insist on deadlines, and the law specifies a deadline. So to answer your question, yeah, that would probably be the most proper way to do it. But we're here today.
I'll make a motion to approve this year's.
Second.
Any discussion?
Now,
Go ahead, Lloyd.
I just want to clarify the approval that we're gonna, please word that for me.
100% exempt.
Okay. Make it 100% exempt this year so we don't have to come back and do the abate.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
And this is a new property. That's why it's
Yeah.
before you like this. Next year, it will be in with all of the other properties that we're going to do next. And yeah, we wouldn't have to do an abatement then.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Shannon.
We need to get a tour.
You can send us an email if you would, so we can send it back. That way we can figure out when we have a time to come see you guys. I'll have Holly. Thank you, sir.
See, man.
Let me explain the abatement thing a little bit more. Let's say a church. Churches are easy to understand because there's so many of them. A church buys a property mid-year and moves into it and uses it for worship services. The very first, November 1st, they make an application for exemption on that property, and they get it granted for 2019, it'll be exempt. But summer of 2018, they were using it. Once the commission has approved the exemption, then they can come back and ask for an abatement for that part of the year that they were using it the year previous. They can't ask for that abatement until the commission has actually granted the exemption. Until that's happened, they're just anybody. They're not a church. They're not exempt until you've approved it. So, yeah, the most proper thing to do would wait for that, for you to grant that exemption, and then the following year come back and ask for an abatement. Now that we're exempt, we want half of the year last year. In this case, they actually moved in November, so for all of 2019, it would have been exempt.
Oh.
So it would have, it's just another step.
Saved us.
The most proper way to do it, yes, but this is easier.
Save you time and energy to having to do another thing.
Okay, so, no. You want to act on that, or do you just want to put on a step list?
We doing new exempts
Okay.
or?
Let's go down, right after Wellspring, we got David and Mary Larson.
Okay.
Okay, so let's deal with that, and then we'll go to those lists. So we had a property owner, not exemption, just appeals his property assessment. I think it's a house. And he couldn't be here for the week that we're meeting later on, which is the 23rd and the 25th. He will be gone for both of those days. And the only other day the Board of Equalization is meeting is today. So we gave him an appointment time for today. We just heard late yesterday afternoon, he now can't be here today. So he ain't gonna show up at all. So you need to act on it because he does have an appeal before the board. So we need action from the board.
Point of clarification, Shannon, from you. So this is appeal from Hill City.
Yes.
Okay, so,
So he appealed to the Hill City Local Board of Equalization. Then, is this something then we appealed the decision of the Hill City Local Board of Equalization. We brought it back to the county board here. He says he can't make any date.
okay, so Hill City had actually given approval
Yeah.
for, okay.
Well,
Taylor,
Local board.
276.
it was originally assessed at 300,600. The local board changed the value to 276,200. Okay,
Okay,
and our recommendation to the board is 300,600. Property owner says he can't be here. We've contacted with him multiple times.
I would make a motion that we leave it at what the county assessor has assessed this property at the 300,000 plus.
300,600 would be nice for the minutes.
I was just gonna ask if it was
Make a-
300,600.
I'll make a substitute. I don't know if we need to, okay, you have to make the motion.
Can I ask
It's 41.
Shannon, why did he feel that was over, your assessment was too high?
I don't know. I haven't talked to him, one of the appraisers in our office. His comment on the appeal form says increase in property valuation. He's concerned about the increase from last year to this year. I haven't talked to him.
I'll jump in here. I was going through this morning. Now, I was looking at the square footage, and I believe we're up into, I'll have to find it. I think he added on an addition, which created, he did a construction permit, so that creates the assessor to come out. I don't know if that was it or not, but it was a $10,000, so he added on more square footage. It's not like it just shot up. There was more,
Yeah.
and the square footage,
And he's put an
from my
addition on
understanding
it.
from reading his letters, is he feels he's surrounded by modular homes at a lower rate, and that since his is stick built, he doesn't feel it fits in there. But if you go, I'm glad Ron's here today because I asked about the square footage. On the second page, 22, yeah, it's 4,400 square feet. Total square footage. That's a lot of square footage for a home on 3/4 of an acre, if I'm reading right. I think the land's assessed right.
Yep.
So that's what I wanted to bring up on this. I understand the local board went down, but I also look at the square footage and the area, and I think the assessors, have they been able to go inside and look at it or do any of that stuff?
No, I needed to add that. The property owner won't let us look at the property.
That helps me a lot, too.
We haven't been able to get inside it.
Okay.
I can say that market in Hill City right now, because I'm on their affordable housing committee, and a couple of months ago, there was only 2 homes in Hill City that were listed for sale under 200,000, and everything else was above, and it's definitely a seller's market in Hill City. And if I just took that 300,000 by 4,000 square feet, that's $75 a square foot, and you can't build a nice garage for $75 a square foot, and that includes the land. So, from a snapshot, I don't see a problem.
We think the value at 300,600 is accurate.
I just,
We would like to take a look at it because maybe there's something we don't know, but he's refused.
well, it's nice to have the owner here so he can actually show us some evidence, and without that evidence, I'm gonna have to go with your expertise.
So Gary made a motion. Are you seconding the motion? I won't make a substitute. That's up to you.
I'll second it.
Okay, there you go. We're back to the original motion at 306.
Yep.
Okay, and there was a second? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? No. One no from Deb.
Okay, so
Quit
that
making a
was the
funny
only.
face. I saw your face when I said that.
Yeah. Okay, so that was the only typical assessment appeal we had, just because he said he couldn't make it the other 2 days. So we scheduled him today, and then he told us he can't be here. So now we're gonna do the rest of the exempt properties. Let's go with the lists, and I want to explain what those are.
Shannon, new exempt? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I would say do all of them at the same time.
All the new exempts?
You've got 3 lists. We say new exempt, partial exempt, and 100% exempt. The board here approves or denies all exemptions from property taxes. Rather than act on one at a time, we put them on a list and give them to you. But we put them on 3 different lists. The new exempts, we put on a list so you know these properties have not been exempt in the past. These are brand new for this year, so you know what the new ones are. The partial exempts are those properties that are only partially exempt, 50% exempt, 50% taxable, or whatever percentage that is. And then the 100% exempt is all of the properties that are fully exempt. Both the 100% and the partial, they have been exempt in the past. We just put them on lists so if you cared, you could see what's been exempt in the past, what's been partially exempt in the past, and what's brand new for this year. I don't know why you can't act on all of them at the same time. I would recommend that you grant the exemption on all of those properties on those lists.
Does anybody have any questions, what that all means or anything before we make a motion? Go ahead.
I don't have questions on what it means, but looking through these, just got a quick question, Shannon. How many of these 100% exempts are churches?
If,
Got umpteen pages,
yep,
and this has been asked in the past about how much property tax and so forth, but
if
I
you
was just
look at the very first line under the heading, it says religious. They're broken down by the categories that are set in state statute. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages, almost 9 pages are churches.
okay. One other question. To qualify for this, what is the procedure?
They make an application to my office by November 1st. I go out and I look at the property to determine if the property is being used for exempt purpose, if they meet the definition of church in state statute. And then that application comes to you for action.
State statute for church.
Yep. All property in South Dakota, all real property is assumed taxable unless it's specifically exempt by statutes. There's a statute for churches, charities, benevolent organization, schools, hospitals. So
I was just wondering what the requirements were to be declared
the
a church. I mean, what happens if I get my license and I want to marry somebody a couple times a year out of my home?
the law is vague. It just describes a religious organization and the property being used for a religious purpose. You would get an argument from me, but then it would come to the board, and you'd give it to them anyways.
Okay.
Naughty, naughty.
The statute for religious organization is pretty broad. The worst one we've got, and I say worst, I mean, I'm on the outside, okay? There is a property outside of Box Elder that is owned by some nonprofit entity. It's got a weird name. I can't even remember how to pronounce it. And it's an old farmstead that's a house and a couple of garages and sheds. And there is an Indian medicine man that lives in the house, and they have sweat lodge parties whatever, a couple times during the summer, and people can come see the Indian medicine man.
Native. Native man. There you go.
So they qualify under religious. All right, it's not what we all think of as church, but the law does not say Baptist, Lutheran, Methodist. It just says religious organization.
Okay. I mean, I just wanted some clarification. I got to answer to people too. I mean, when we have big numbers like that, it kind of makes you wonder, is it abused or is it not? And how do we,
I think the potential is there because the law is so vague. But that one I described to you is the one I say that's on the outside. All of the other ones that we've got here are what we'd all call legitimate churches. They are churches, they hold worship services just like every other church. So at present, I don't think it is being abused. I think the potential's there. I've had some arguments from churches that have owned bare land that they plan to build a church on someday, churches that have owned land that is just plain an investment. I had one guy who is he is a pastor that doesn't work for a church. He is a traveling ministry, and he holds evangelistic series all over for whoever hires him. His office is in his home, and he applied for an exemption, and I argued with him, and he actually pulled the application because I said, you might be a pastor, but your home is your home. You just happen to have an office in your home. And so maybe that is one of the extreme ones, but he pulled the application.
okay. Well, thanks for clarifying that. It makes me feel better knowing that after looking at them. Thanks.
I'd like to see the law tighter, but I think the legislature would have a difficult time tightening up that law because how would you describe a religious organization?
Shannon, is there an application or a form that they have to come and fill out so that you can review it to see its legitimacy?
There's an application that they make, it's right here. And it just says which statute are you claiming exemption under? And who owns the property and what's it being used for? That's it.
And once they fill that out, then is some of this information verified or
Yes.
through your office ensure that it's correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
We go out and we look at the property. We see, is it being used for that? And we do what we can to determine if that ownership meets the definition in the law that grants the exemption.
What defines, what's the difference between the 50% and 100%? Is that just based on the information they give you, you don't feel that it's 100%? And so the 50% is just some type of a ratio that,
They're not using the entire property. We have 10 acres, but the church sits on 2, and maybe that's a bad example. Let's use 40 acres, okay? Because I can think of a church that has 40 acres, and they're not using all 40 acres for church. They only need 8 or 10 acres for the church, and the rest of it, I can think of one church that's growing sod. The guy rents the property and has a sod farm on it. So we look at the percentage of the property that's being used as a church.
so they normally fill the application out, and then through your verification process, you determine then that either it's 100% or it's a part thereof.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's,
Most properties are 100% exempt. The hospital is a percentage exempt because the hospital has, the main hospital down here actually has part of it that is rented by doctors and not used by the hospital. The hospital is like 99 point something percent used by the hospital, but the hospital acknowledges that there's this little part that they rent out to doctors.
so that screening process, I guess, is our safety mechanism to ensure that the ones that we're looking at here, that they're legitimate, or at least most of them are.
Oh no, you're the safety net. See, I do my job and then you're the safety
We're
net.
assuming that you're correct.
This is all we get from them. That's it.
Cool.
And most of them are pretty simple. Just drive out and take a look at them. That's it. call the owner, with the example of Wellspring, okay? They made a late application, so it was here just recently that I drove out. I knew the property was being used, you can see what it is. But some of these, it takes a drive-by to see if it's being used, and if it's being used by them or somebody else. But I drove out to it, met the management there, and I asked a bunch of questions about who owns it, what kind of organization it is. They are a nonprofit, non-profitable charitable organization. There are private companies that do what they do for profit. They would not be exempt. But I asked a whole bunch of questions about who you are, what you do, and what you're using the property for, and that's why it comes to you with a
Do
recommendation.
they have to prove their exempt status?
The law says owned by a charity and used for charitable purpose, and then it goes on down farther to define what a charity is. And all of them actually say they have to be a 501c3 nonprofit or whatever. Being a nonprofit doesn't mean you're exempt from property taxes, but you have to be a nonprofit to be exempt from property taxes. In the case of Wellspring, I didn't ask them to prove they were a nonprofit. They offered whatever the IRS document is, but I believed them. You know, after they tell me who they are and they own other properties, I'm confident they are.
Yeah, I wouldn't think it'd be that hard to show proof that you are a nonprofit 501c3.
Yep, and if I ask for it, they provide it. It's just whatever that IRS document is. We get that with some of these applications.
So I would say that would be the largest safety mechanism, showing proof of that 501c3.
Well, most of them that are
I mean,
legitimately,
if you're in doubt, you
Oh,
have
yeah.
every right to do that.
yeah, most of them it's obvious though. We're dealing with the Elks Lodge. We're dealing with Black Hills Crisis Pregnancy Center. I know they're nonprofit. Okay, there's very few arguments there, but occasionally I have to ask for something. If I've never heard of them, don't know what they are, I start asking questions.
I'd make a motion to approve the new exempts for 2019, the partial exempts of 2019, and the 100% exempts for 2019.
I'll second that motion.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, motion carries.
Okay, so the law says that they have the right to come back after so many days and argue if they were unhappy with what you did. Nobody's going to do that. The only one that showed up here to argue anyways, you gave him something, he seemed happy, so I don't think you'll hear from any exempt properties on the 23rd or the 25th. But I'd like to give you an introduction of what we're looking at next couple of days, because you're here till noon, so I can keep talking till noon, right?
Are we done with the
You're done with the exempt. Yep.
and
We're done with today.
new exempts and denied exempts? We already voted on that?
That his motion was all of them.
Yeah. You did the top and the bottom of it, the new ones?
Yep,
and
yep, we just
okay.
did everything you've got on that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so the Board of Equalization will meet again on the 23rd and the 25th. That is when the typical property owners will come to you with their regular assessment appeals. We are looking at about 300 total appeals this year. Okay, that's what we're going to have this year. I wanted to point out that in the past, maybe 9 years ago, we were running 600 to 700 appeals. Deb can tell you stories about how this board met for Board of Equalization for a week to 2 weeks at a time, on into 9 o'clock at night and even on weekends. You should be fortunate. We're only meeting for like 3.5 days. When I first started here, we did 5 days of this stuff. This is a whole lot quicker than what it has been in the past. What we will do, and this is mainly for the new commissioners, is we will present the board a list of all of the properties that we make a recommendation to change. Okay, the property owner has appealed, and they've talked to somebody in our office. We've gone out and we've looked at the property, and we found something about that property that we didn't know before. So we make a recommendation to the board to change it. We're gonna put all of those on a list so that you don't have to act on every single one of those individually. It saves a whole bunch of time. We will only have about 25 people that will show up before this board to make an argument. Most of them we've met with ahead of time, and we're going to make a recommendation, and they're happy with it, and they're not going to appear before the board. 300 total appeals, and only 25 are going to show up here because they're not happy with what we say. If we find something that's wrong, we can't change the value. We have to bring it to you for a recommendation to change. Those that we have no recommendation on, we are confident that that value is right. You should be aware that the reason they're showing up here is they disagree with us, but we seriously think the value is correct. And we're gonna come here and make that argument to you, and they're gonna make another argument. They think the value is wrong. All of those that we think there's something wrong with the value, we're gonna make a recommendation to you.
Shannon, just to clarify again, so you had about 300, right?
We're around 300 total appeals this year.
You guys have already talked with them and you come up with your recommendation so we can deal with them in lump sums?
Yep. Rather than act on them one at a time,
Yep.
we put them on a list, and here is 200 of them.
And both parties are agreeable on that? On
Well,
that list, right?
We actually make two lists. One list is we make a recommendation to change, and the other list is we make a recommendation no change. The property owner is either happy or unhappy with it, but he chooses not to show up.
Okay, okay.
So if he's not gonna be here, there's no point in doing them one at a time.
Yeah.
Only the people that want to show up and say something, we schedule an appointment for.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so the 25 that we can expect, how many of those would be commercial and how many would be residential and how many would be other? Are we-
commercial, residential, and ag. I don't know, my 25 number is rounded.
Okay.
Let's say you're probably gonna hear an argument on 3 or 4 ag properties. Most of them are gonna be residential, and then you're gonna hear some commercial properties.
Okay,
We are getting more and more every year, tax reps that are representing commercial properties. We haven't yet had a tax rep well, no, not on a residential property. You acted as a tax rep in the past.
right.
We are getting more and more of them that are coming from out of state, who don't want to drive here, they want to call in. A tax rep, at least those, make a commission, and they frequently sign up clients like a used car salesman does. It doesn't matter what the value is, just sign here, I'll make an argument. If you get something, we both make money, kind of a thing. We're getting more and more of that as time goes on, and I think it'll continue to be that way. In the past, we've always seen appeals for 3 different reasons. I've said before that a third of the property owners appeal because their property simply isn't worth that. They appeal their assessment. A third of the property owners appeal their assessment just because if they win something, they save some money on taxes. The value might be right, they don't care, they're taking a shot at it. And then a third of the people just plain hate government, hate taxes, and they're gonna appeal no matter what that assessment notice says. Okay, we've always seen that, but the numbers are shifting. We are looking at our properties more often than we have in the past. When I started here, it was 20-plus years that some of the properties are looked at. We're on track right now to cover the entire county every 6 years or so, okay? It's amazing how accurate you can be and how good our values can be when we actually go out and we look at properties, all right? Our values get more accurate. The changes from year to year aren't as dramatic. If it's been 20 years since you've been to that property and you go look at it, the value's probably going to change significantly, and people tend to appeal the change more than the number, really. But as our values have got more accurate, we have seen less appeals from property owners whose value is just wrong. We've seen fewer of those people. That's why our appeal numbers are coming down. But there are those other categories, the people that hate government and hate taxes, they're going to appeal every year, okay? It seems like there's more of those this year than there was in the past. There's not, there's the same number, but there's fewer other appeals for legitimate reasons. So you'll always see those, but we are seeing less appeals every year because our numbers are simply getting better.
Out of the 25, how many of those did you work with and say, look at I don't totally agree with your number, but there was a reduction, or was there no reduction at all? I'm just saying, was there a compromise in any of those 25, or just no change at all?
No, on those that are going to appear before the board, you have to pay attention what the appraiser from my office says, because frequently they will have a recommendation to change the value. The property owner is just unhappy with that.
Okay,
It isn't enough. Pay attention. Sometimes my appraiser will stand up and say, the value's fine, recommend no change.
okay.
Sometimes they'll say, recommend a change to this point, property owner is still unhappy with that, wants to make an
So
argument.
there's going to be a mix.
Yep, absolutely.
Next question, if a applicant comes in and they're appealing their assessed value and they provide a recent appraisal, and that's just, got my appraiser hat on, how much merit do you give that appraisal?
A lot. We are still doing an appraisal. So we have our appraisal, but we look at the property owner's appraisal, and whenever a property owner says they have an appraisal, we ask for a copy of it.
Okay,
We give it a lot of weight. We don't always agree with it. Most of the time, we can agree with it.
sure.
We have seen some funny appraisals. And if we don't agree with the appraisal, we'll point out to the property owner, we've got this sale, this sale, this sale. Your appraisal here didn't look at these sales, and we'll point out those differences and explain that. But most of the time, the appraisals are good appraisals, and we will frequently make a recommendation to this board to make a change in the value. We hope that if we go to that appraisal, we'll actually find some property data that we didn't know. We'll go out and we'll look at the property. So the appraisal sort of becomes secondary, because if there's something we don't know about that property that appraiser did, we want to know that too.
So Shannon, what is our schedule? Basically, at this point, can you tell us, because I got to change my schedule at work as well, so to make sure I'm on time.
All day the 23rd, all day the 25th, but we've got some property owners who we put on a schedule because they appealed, and then we find out they're not coming. We've got a bunch of property owners we are still talking to. We haven't gone out and looked at every property yet. Some of those that say that they're not going to come, we'll put somebody else's name on top of that. There could very well be some gaps on the 23rd and 25th, but we don't know.
But there's
when.
only 2 days that we will be doing
Oh, that's only 2
equalization.
days, yeah.
2 days.
We're going to be
Okay.
done in the 2 days.
And we start at 9 o'clock both those days.
Yes.
So everybody's on the same page. And it
Yep.
could last all day. on
It'll
both of those.
probably last all day, with there might be some breaks where we got to wait for the next appellant to come in.
Okay.
But it'll be mostly full days for those 2 days.
Okay, everybody on that page?
And nothing on the 26th?
Nope.
23rd and 25th.
Am I getting the dates right? 23rd and 25th?
I've had that scheduled for quite a while.
Well, it's changed though,
Yep.
because we had the 26th, we didn't have the 23rd.
We had something, yeah, next week,
We
23rd.
picked some days.
17th.
Initially, we picked several days, because at the beginning of this, we don't know how many appeals we're going to get.
Yep.
And what we try to do is we try to fill full days at a time before we go to another day.
Okay,
And we're pretty sure,
just the
we're
23rd and
confident we'll be done with the 23rd and the 25th.
23rd, 25th are the only 2 days.
Yeah.
So you guys know at 9 o'clock is when we start. Gary, you're covered on that.
Yep.
Do we have any more questions or discussion before we recess? Do we have to make a motion to recess, Kara? Motion to recess?
So moved.
Moved by Lloyd. Second by Gary. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.